Welcome to Rock Your Block Beyond the Classroom. I'm your host, Gene Levinson, and today we have returning guest, Mr. Greg Nussbaum, for part 2 of our discussion on education and tools to help our students retain what they learn in school and also beyond the classroom. Mr. Nussbaum, a Virginia Public Schools teacher, has created an educational website, mrnussbaum.com, that is used by over 4 million students every month in 2/3 of the world's countries. In part 1 of our series, Mr. Nussbaum introduced us to his fantastic website and started to demonstrate some of his cool videos, and we ran out of time. Today, we're going to continue with our discussion on education and tools that motivate our kids to learn and that help them to remember what they've learned. Mr. Nussbaum, welcome back.
Thanks for having me again.
So, how many games are there on your site?
Well, mrnussbaum.com has, currently there's 150 games on the site, and
that's a lot. Of games.
Yeah, it's a lot of.
And that's not including the drills.
No, these are just games, and these games are products of of my imagination. They get brought to life by a group of talented designers and programmers, and so there's 150 games. They're all original to my site. And beyond that, though, the site has 3,800 pages. The games are just a small portion of the site. The major portion of the site is, social studies and science topics, math generators, teacher tools, printables, things like that.
Which are the games that the kids like the most, do you think?
Well, different groups.
I know kids like sports.
That's right. Different groups of kids will like different games. But certainly, for my 6th grade boys, the sports games work best. They love to role play in sports game type environments where they don't.
When you say your 6th grade boys, you mean the 6th grade classroom that you
That's
teach.
Right. That's right. Right. And so the kids love to role play in such situations where they don't always totally recognize that they're learning.
Well, so if we're talking about sports, that's a great segue into the video clips, which I know is one of the special features that our viewers are waiting to see today. Let's go right into this next video segment, which is called Math Slalom. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
This game was inspired by the old Nintendo Entertainment System game called Slalom. And the idea is you're a skier. You choose whether you want to practice addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division. And so you'll see a message at the top of the screen like ×5. And you'll ski through the flags where ×5 would make the equation work. So for example, if you have a flag that had 7 on and then 35, you'd have to ski through it. And the idea is to ski through the course, which also includes obstacles like rocks and roving teddy bears. The idea is to try to finish the course as quickly as possible.
How do you steer when you say?
Well, it's a 3D game. You use the keys on the computer, or you can use the mouse to steer the skier. Kids absolutely love this game. It's fast-paced, and it helps reinforce their math facts.
Oh, that is great. Well, you actually have several sports-related themes on the site. There's another one that you've shared with us called Sweet 16 Word Madness.
Right. So
kind of like March Madness, only Word
exactly.
Madness.
And if you were to visit my site, you might see that there's more than 1 or 2 games that are themed after March Madness, which is a crazy time in my household. So Sweet 16 Word...
And mine as well.
Yeah. Sweet 16 Word Madness puts kids right in the middle of the Sweet 16. They get to pick up for a fictional college team, and they're actually playing against another fictional college team. And the idea is to score as many baskets as they can by completing words. So there'll be 4 basketballs, and there'll be an incomplete word. And each of the basketballs will have letters that would complete the correct word or would make the word incorrect. So they have to click on the correct basketball, and so they have 1.5 minutes to beat the opponent. And so if they win, they go on to the grade 8, to the Final Four, and eventually to the championship. And kids love this game because they get to role play as their favorite college basketball team. They can choose from 16 or 18 different college basketball teams. and it's particularly effective during March when the kids are into the tournament.
Oh yeah.
And it's just another way that I'm a huge sports fan, so a lot of my games are sports themed.
That's great. So the kids have different levels of challenge in this, right? Because they have to get all the way to the Final Four and then beyond, right?
That's right, and it gets a little bit harder each round.
Yeah, and that's so important that there is that challenging element to it, right?
Absolutely, particularly for self-motivated students. Yes.
Right. So, what would sports be without a little friendly competition? So,
right.
So you have a game that I think is called Tournament?
Well, actually, the tournament is a program in a new site that I started building called Mr. Nussbaum Extend.
Oh, okay.
And this particular this particular program turns the classroom into a wild main event, because what it does, it allows teachers to create tournaments with their class, with the students in their class, or they can put students into teams and have the teams battle each other. And so the battles can be on any math skill imaginable. You could have kids in a tournament who are competing using multiplication facts, reducing fractions, completing words, whatever you want, and students battle each other.
So do the students choose which math aspect they're focusing on, or is this something that the teachers
The teacher
guide them?
chooses. And what really excites students is they can see who they're matched up against, and so they see they're matched up against their classmates, and then in real time they can see scores come in.
Really?
So exactly, and this turns the classroom into a wild academic environment. And particularly when teachers choose to make tournaments where they put students in teams and the teams battle each other, it's really it's a huge motivator for students. They actually love these friendly academic competitions. It kind of introduces a very exciting element into the classroom beyond reinforcing important facts and important concepts.
What sort of feedback do you get from the teachers about how effective this is for learning for the kids?
I get a lot of really positive feedback. I get a lot of emails from teachers telling me how much of a difference that my materials make in their classroom.
That must be so gratifying when you get those. I mean,
it is.
It validates what you're doing.
It's really gratifying knowing that the things I'm creating are affecting in a positive way students all over the world.
Large numbers of them.
And teachers also send me emails, giving me feedback on things they'd like to see on the site, and that's where that's the only way I improve the site, is I take their suggestions, I take their feedback, and apply them to the site.
Mm-hmm. Well, another thing that kids really enjoy is astronomy. Mm-hmm. And I noticed that you have brought a couple of clips that have to do with that. In one of them, not only is it about astronomy, but they actually get to play the role of creating an entire solar system. Well, I mean, I never got to do that when I was a kid. I wish I could have created a solar system.
Well, again, this was the product of my imagination. A couple of years ago.
I mean, thank goodness for your imagination.
Well, the ones you see on the site are the games that work. There's plenty of games that have come from my imagination that ultimately didn't work. But here,
so you collect feedback on which one. How do you gather statistics on what's working and what isn't?
Basically, I can tell, because when I put together like a schematic of what I'm looking for in a game, and I submit this to my developers, sometimes my view of how something will work isn't reflected in the product, and it's because I didn't make it clear enough, or the idea just wasn't able to be translated into digital reality.
Well, it's only when things become concrete that you can see those things.
Exactly. Right? Exactly. And so, back to the solar system. So a couple of years ago, I created a whole interactive unit for teachers on space, where I made, sort of animations on the constellations, on the tides. And I wanted to culminate that with some kind of game or some kind of application that students could have a lot of fun with. So I came up with this idea of a solar system maker, where students could create their own solar system. They could name the planets.
So they can choose how many planets?
They can choose how many planets, they can design the planets, they can apply rings to the planets, moons to the planets, and then they could set the whole solar system in motion. and they could
That sounds like so much fun. I mean,
Oh yeah,
I'm going to have to try that myself.
no, they do that. That is another one that gets a lot of traffic.
Am I allowed to do that if I'm not a kid?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean,
I'll bet a lot of adults do this actually.
I think so. I think so.
And share the experience with their own kids when they're doing it.
I hope so.
Too.
I definitely hope so. So yeah, that's how that one was born.
And then there's another one called Planets, I believe. Is that right? Or is that the same one that you're...
That's the same one as the solar system maker I have. But I did, as I said, create a whole interactive unit on... that interactive unit includes animations and things with all the planets.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, okay, so then let's shift gears just a little bit. And the next one is called... V-Birder, virtual birder.
That's right.
And this is really about bird watching and learning about the different species and actually about their songs as well.
Yeah, that's right. My dad instilled in me a love of bird watching at an early age. And so just last year, I wanted to create something that sort of reflected that love of bird watching. So I came up with V-Birder, which is an interactive way for kids to sort of virtually bird watch. And so kids can choose from 4 different habitats, one of which happens to be the backyard. And so birds come in and out of backyard scenes, and the idea is for students to identify them. And the graphics are 3D, they're very realistic. And so, students learn through V-Birder how to identify the birds in their backyard. They also learn to identify less familiar birds that they might find, if they're walking at Burke Lake or Huntley Meadows, they might see...
Those are local lakes.
That's right. And so they might see, little blue herons or prairie warblers or prothonotary warblers or birds like that. So the idea was to expose kids to the many different kinds of birds out there. So the habitats are in Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Alabama to try to give them some geographic diversity as well.
Terrific, terrific. And so they can identify the songs. They can also identify the birds by their coloration and markings and so on.
The birds sing their actual songs, and I've partnered with some organizations to help procure those songs so that they can be played. And so the game also keeps a lot of statistics, so kids can see what birds they've identified, which ones they haven't identified, and the frequency of which birds appear in the habitat mirrors breeding bird survey data. It mirrors actual data. So birds like robins will appear more than a bird such as a scarlet tanager, for example.
I see. We're going to take a short station break. When we return, our special guest, Mr. Greg Nussbaum, will share another video clip from his website, mrnussbaum.com, and then we'll get into some conversation about some of the broader implications of what he's doing as well.
I helped turn my child's public school into a whole new kind of school. One with a curriculum that really motivates kids. One that has extended hours, 6 days a week, year-round. With loads of academic, cultural, and recreational activities. One that has support services like medical and dental right there. A school where parents' involvement is encouraged. Where teachers have more time to teach. And students are excited about learning. There's just one problem. My child doesn't ever want to come home. You can help turn your school into a community school for excellence. Find out how. Call 1-877-LOVE-TO-LEARN.
Welcome back. You are watching Rock Your Block and today's segment of Beyond the Classroom with our special guest, Mr. Greg Nussbaum. Prior to the break, we were reviewing just some of the many examples that Mr. Nussbaum has created on his site. This is just a sample of what you have on the site, Mr. Nussbaum. Can you maybe focus on a different aspect of the different games that you have? For example, geometry, okay? So kids hate geometry the way it's generally taught in the classroom. I hate to say it. And I mean, it's because it scares them. They're anxious about it. There's a lot of memorization involved. But you have this game called, I think, Shape Maker, I believe.
That's right.
That actually makes it fun for kids to learn about these different things. Could you tell us about that?
Well, Shape Maker is a game that's designed for kids just being introduced to geometry. So it doesn't reinforce the higher concepts of geometry. It reinforces in a fun way the shape. So it's perfect for kids who are kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2. And so basically in the game, there's an online geoboard, and there's a teacher who will sort of announce on the screen, build me a parallelogram. And so just like students would do with a sort of offline geoboard, they have to build a parallelogram, and then the program checks to see if they actually built a parallelogram, if they made the right sides, the right angles. And there's another part of the game where they can build pictures with shapes. And kids like this because they can drag and drop shapes onto a screen, and they can change the color and the size of the shapes, and there's like 12 different shapes that they can use. And eventually, as they drag, when they drag the shapes onto the screen, there's a little calculator at the top. It shows them how many total sides their picture is. So if they drag a square onto the screen, there'll be 4 sides. And then if they add a triangle, it'll say 7 sides. So it also reinforces a little bit of addition as well.
Oh, great. So, yeah, I really shouldn't have said that kids hate geometry, but they're intimidated by it, I think, is what I really meant to say.
That's right.
And, and it's that fear of failing that makes kids anxious about a subject. When they say, I hate this, or I'm not good at this, it's because they're afraid that they're going to make a mistake, and then that's going to say something bad about them. But if you can just get the kids to focus on what they're actually doing with the material, which is what your games really do, it gets away from that anxiety.
It does, and that's the magic of online games too. Well-designed online games give very direct and positive feedback. So if a student needs to practice a certain skill, an online game can be perfect for reinforcement if the feedback is right. Mm-hmm. So in my games, I strive very hard to make sure that when the games give feedback, it's gentle feedback and very positive.
What do you mean by gentle feedback?
So, when kids are playing games, sometimes, if the games ask kids to solve a problem or to drag and drop something to the right place, and if the student doesn't do that correctly, the feedback has to be gentle. It has to be something to the effect of, close, try again.
Right.
Oh, don't give up, keep trying. And it has to motivate kids not to give up. Right, it has to encourage kids to keep going. And for the games I make, there's always a reward at the end of the game. Mm-hmm. And so hopefully, students who need practice on certain skills are encouraged to keep trying until they reach the goal.
And do you find that the kids come back and try again and again? Is that working?
I believe it is.
Yeah.
I do see, at least for the students that I am able to observe, that yes. Students, they love challenges, but a challenge of making online games is to make it entertaining and educational.
And educational at the same time.
Right, the
That's
word
what they call edutainment, right?
Exactly. And so the idea is to make a game that sort of balances the two. You don't want to kids don't like games that are too educational, where they're simply typing numbers into a text box. But games that are too entertaining and don't teach skills aren't good for kids either. So it's always a very fine line. It's always the mark of a good game is one where where learning is the byproduct, where students don't necessarily realize that they're learning, but they are learning, and they're entertained by the gameplay or the role play or the graphics, and that they keep coming back to it.
And I guess you're getting data on that, aren't you? Because you can tell which games the kids are coming back to, right?
That's right.
From the statistics that you gather on the site. I mean, you're actually learning a lot about what works and what doesn't work.
Exactly.
By trial and error.
Right. And I have a statistics program that shows me how long users stay on certain pages, and
that's so important.
How they get onto the site, what pages they come to from the search engines, and what pages they leave from. So I get a lot of feedback just by looking at the numbers on what works.
And that allows you to make it better and better, right? I mean, that's the whole idea of the feedback, is incremental improvement.
Exactly. So I take for certain games getting a lot of traffic, I realize, okay, this is a popular game. So I take the elements of that game, I take what I learned and apply that to the next game or project that I start.
Well, I know that before the show you were telling me, and I believe you, why teaching is the greatest job in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel that as a tutor. I mean, I would say that tutoring is the greatest job in the world from my perspective. But can you share with our viewers why it is that teaching is the greatest job in the world from your perspective?
For me, it is absolutely just the greatest job. I think it's really the only job that I could do. It's just a gift to be able to connect with kids, to be able to teach kids, and to be able to have an impact on their lives, particularly when you run a website. It's amazing to see that the things that I create are actually effective in the classroom. And so for me, it's a pleasure coming to work, to be able to work with kids. When I first started teaching, I taught second graders. And now I teach sixth graders. I don't know if I could ever go back to teaching second grade, but when I was teaching second grade, it was still the most amazing job in the world. And the kids were a lot more needy than they are in sixth grade. In sixth grade, they're more independent, they're self-sufficient, they're self-motivated, they're not quite as eager to please as the younger kids, but it's a whole new challenge in itself. It also lets me, as I've mentioned several times, use my imagination and to sort of lead projects. And I guess one of my favorite projects that I do in the classroom is and I'm a history buff, is the interactive social studies notebook.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so in my class we don't call them notebooks, we call them museums. And they physically are notebooks, but the museum is an interactive account of everything we learn throughout the year in American history. And in these particular notebooks, kids actually have a blast building them, because within the notebook lies the answers to the greatest mysteries in history. For example, in my students' notebooks, we build the Electra, which is Amelia Earhart's long-lost airplane, and they hide it in their museum. With the Electra is a long-lost note that describes exactly what happened to Amelia Earhart. Of course, one of the greatest mysteries in history. They also make the ghost of Virginia Dare. Virginia Dare, of course, being the first English-born child in the New World. And they hide that in their museum. And Virginia Dare comes with a message telling people who might visit the museum exactly what the word Croatoan means and what happened to the lost colony. So these are just examples of how I sort of use my imagination to create inquiry in the classroom, and to try to make the classroom an exciting place, to try to sort of introduce an element of building and just having fun and thinking outside the box.
So you just described what goes on your website as well. Do you use your own games in your own classroom?
Oh, absolutely. The games are great motivators. I allow kids to play the games after they finish something in the classroom, when they have free time.
As a reward.
As a reward. And my students, the great thing about my students is that they know my games they know the games so well. And so
they're probably so proud to have you as a teacher. I mean, really. That's got to be exciting for them.
At first they are, but I think that kind of wears off over time, because then they see me as, I'm a teacher.
A human being, not perfect in every way.
Right. But
almost perfect, though, I think.
No, far from it. So it's great because they're the best at giving feedback too. Is they have the best ideas. So I can leverage the ideas they have to actually create content as well.
So in other words, they inspire you to create some of these games.
I'm totally inspired by my students and their ideas. And so for all those reasons, like it's a gift for me to be a teacher. I couldn't be any other job, and I've had experience. Building the website has exposed me to the business world and the technology world, and so I kind of can compare, what it's, the stresses of each, and I couldn't do anything else but teaching. I love it, and it's just a gift.
That is really nice to hear. I mean, I wish that all teachers got to experience that excitement in their own classrooms. Teaching is obviously a tough job, right? I mean, there are a lot of challenges.
Sure, it's like any other job. There are a lot of challenges, and there are surprises every day, and there's more work than you expect. But again, given the experience I've had, seeing how things work in other fields, I wouldn't trade being a teacher.
The clock on the wall says that we're just about out of time, but I want to thank Mr. Greg Nussbaum again for sharing his pioneering work with us. I hope this will also be an inspiration to kids who want to become teachers in the future, because as you can see, teaching has gotten more interesting than it ever was before. And as I always myself say, because I really believe it, the future of education is very bright.